So, hi everyone, I'm Michael Landy, Assistant Professor and ER Census Chair for Engineering Education in Mechanical Engineering, and thanks for joining us for our Mechanical Engineering Research Seminar. We're happy to have Bill Oakes join us from Purdue. He's the 150th anniversary professor and the director of the EPICS program, as well as one of the founders of the School of Engineering Education, and he's a professor there of engineering education. So I know Bill through the engineering education research community, but he's going to talk about EPICS, which is engineering projects in community service, as a way to engage engineering students in the community. There's lots of interesting aspects of it that echo some of the things that we care about here at South Dakota Mines, of innovation and designing in context and multidisciplinary design. He'll talk about some research findings as well connected to EPICS. And you may or may not know, we have EPICS here at South Dakota Mines, and we're just touching base, and Bill was here about a year and a little bit, visiting with some of the folks who run EPICS here, and then some of our local partners. There's a Oglala Lakota college where they've done some EPICS projects with students here at Mines, of greenhouses in the community and other really kind of interesting things. So Bill is an innovator in engineering and education. So he was recognized a couple years ago for his work with EPICS with a couple other folks at Purdue by the National Academy of Engineering, and they're given the Bernard Gordon Prize for innovation in engineering and technology education. So he has lots of interesting things to relate around EPICS and his experience as a professor. So thank you, Bill. You should be able to share your screen if you want to share some slides. Well, I hand it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Did that?
Yeah, so we can see your slides.
Okay, got it. No, I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that this is a way that we can maybe get reconnected or connected. This last year with COVID has been, well, it's just been. A little bit about my background. So I'm a mechanical engineer. I had a job I loved. I was a turbine designer, GE Aviation. One of the things that I did was, like on the side, is I was part of the recruiting teams for GE. And so when we would go to campus, we'd go and often we'd be talking about there's got to be better ways for us to be able to educate future employees. And I really envisioned that as industry projects, which involved a lot of jet engines. And if I can get a picture of a jet engine in a presentation, I always like to do that. Well, I went to Purdue for my PhD, and they hired me as a faculty member there. And in 1998, I got assigned to teach this class called EPICS, which had started 3 years before. Leah Jameson, Ed Coyle created the program. And I thought it was an interesting thing, and it's going to be an interesting side, because this is an example of a sailboat that one of our teams designed for children with disabilities. So on the bottom, you see there's some electronics. The idea was, could somebody with a joystick or even a sip and puff, a straw switch, be able to steer the sailboat? Initially, we were thinking that they could handle the sail, and that we ended up with just they can run the rudder, but they were actually the captain of the ship. So this was for a camp with children with disabilities. And when I looked at this, I thought, this is really great stuff, but it's not like this. It's not a jet engine. So this is a nice side light. Well, what happened, and when I got teaching this, it flipped my thinking, because what I've realized is, what I saw very quickly is the students were doing the kinds of things that we did in industry. One of the things is I noticed they complained about the same types of things, but they were building fundamental skills. And I had the opportunity where my worlds collided about 3 years ago. We actually had the chief engineer for GE Aviation touring our labs, was talking to she was a sophomore, junior, who was leading this team and describing this project. And this chief engineer turned to his entourage and said, get her resume. We need to hire her. She's got the exact kind of skills that we're looking for. And what I realize is the projects that we do don't have to look like what they're going to do later, but they've got to teach the fundamental skills. When I think of epics, and epics was started to actually prepare students for leadership in industry. And so when we look at things like how do we prepare future leaders, that the key, there's a lot of research that talks about students need experiences. And what we can do is actually connect with community projects for that. For me personally, one of the things that has made epics in this kind of work even deeper is the opportunities to benefit society. So the opportunities, so while we're giving students the kinds of experiences that are going to make them better professionals, we can have a tangible impact on our society. When I think of reasons this is becoming important, and I'm sure this is discussed on your campus, this last year, a lot of people figured out that they could do online education. And the question comes, it's like, why do I want to come to campus? So 2 hours ago, I was actually on a call with another university, and they said they're worried about that. So why do you come to campus? One of the reasons is experiences. And I really appreciate the things that you have at Minds, that you've got a rich, a number of experiences. You've got different opportunities. You've got your camp program, and with those. But this is going to become even more important, I think, with our campuses. With, I guess it's like 3 years out, the number of high school students starts to drop off. So there are a lot of institutions that are worried about what that's going to look like. Anyway, and I think one of the reasons is you need experiences. So what are the kinds of things that we can do? Now, I want to come sharing some ideas. Really, one of the graphics that I think of is I think we're all part of a big puzzle. And I think some of the things that we're doing could fit with other pieces. And I really come, and I'm hoping that this opens more doors for more collaborations between our institutions and opportunities to really have an impact. The work that we've done in South Dakota, especially the work with the Lakota people, it has been some of the most exciting work that I've done over the last 25 years in this field. And I think that there are things to do in other areas in South Dakota and actually globally for those. So our EPICS program, I know some of you have seen this before, that we've got our courses at Purdue. We run, that was a typo. We run about 500 students, 500 to 600 students a semester. We've got a university consortium that's got more than 50 universities. And we've also got K-12 programs, high school and middle school programs that have EPICS programs in their high school. So we work with our school and with the university, and we count the things that you all do over with that. So to give you some examples of some of the projects that we do, we talk about the different areas of impact. One of them is the access and abilities. So those could be communication devices. I mentioned that sailboat was at a camp for children with disabilities. And we love this camp because it is a camp where any child with any kind of disability can have a summer camp experience. And so we're looking at pieces. We do custom prosthetics. We've also got a team with a local engineer that looks at I have this looks like a race car, but it's related to like the soapbox derby. These cars don't have an engine in them, but it's an opportunity for children with disabilities to be able to drive a car like in a soapbox derby kind of environment. But you've also got another adult there to help provide the safety in the steering, but it allows the children to participate. In education, we do work with schools, asking the schools what they would look like. These schools can be in local areas. We're partnering with some schools in India and in South America. Right now, what our teams are doing is looking at what teachers can do hands-on with the children in their homes. We partner with zoos. We were just looking at a failure analysis of some students that were developing some devices to give monkeys some exercise and talking about what some of the things that they could do with the devices. Um, we've got some teams that are working on electric vehicle education and outreach. So there are some electric vehicle competition type things. Our teams aren't working on the competition vehicle, but they're working with the groups that run them to look at their specification and kind of like looking at 1 or 2 years out of what the kits could look like and what are some of the specifications in those. In human services, we do a lot of IT work, um, looking for software solution. There's also looking at disaster resistant issues of food security. I don't have a picture of this, but one of the projects that we're doing with the Lakota is trying to look at the food sovereignty and food security issues out on the reservation. Um, Epics is when I showed the puzzle piece, we're one of the models doing this kind of work with a lot of others. So they're groups that we partner with, like Engineers Without Borders. So what we've done is taken the EWB project and put it into an Epics course so the students all get credit for their work. And so what we've got is we've got a club and we've got a class. So the students who are actually working on the technical details are all signed up for a class, which commits them to a certain amount of work and mentoring. If we look at partners, so if I go back, that we were part of a NSF grant that Minds led, that brought the Aglolo Lakota College in as our first Native American partner. Those are some pictures on the Rapid City campus when we present a little plaque, and that was through connections that we had at Minds. We've looked at food sovereignty with some of the things. There's looking at greenhouse. We were looking at some models for culture centers. There's a greenhouse on the Rapid City campus at OLC that the system was spec'd out by OLC students, Mind students, and Purdue students also. And there were actually multiple funding sources, one of them from Ford Motor Company. The relationship that we had when we started was interesting because we had students from Minds, Purdue, and OLC that had a common class time and actually connected remotely, and then they broke out into different projects. Some of them, they were working on parallel, and some of them that they were working combined. And as we, at some point, we will get past the COVID restrictions, and that we'd be very excited to re-energize that. We've continued to work with OLC over this last year. In the fall semester, we worked with students. This last semester, we've just been working with the faculty because they're all online. And we've still got the partner, Jim Sinovia. Some of you may know him. he got his master's over in civil engineering at Mines as an instructor there. That he's there on the right. One of the concepts that I think differentiates the philosophy of the EPICS structure is, how do you pass projects across semesters? And so what we do is we have students that are registering for multiple semesters, and we do not tie the project to a specific semester timeline. Each student has specific deliverables during a semester, but the projects may span multiple semesters. And what that's done, it does a couple things. From a learning standpoint, what it does is when a new student comes in, they pop into a project that's partway through. At the beginning, I said I was interested in, how do you give students experiences like they do in industry? In industry, I was never given a clean sheet of paper and said, hey, brainstorm on what an engine could look like. We were almost always picking up the work for somebody else. It may have been preliminary design, had done some of the things, and we're building up. Could be a mature program where we're popping on something and they've got field issues. So students come and go. They need to learn how to document. They need to learn how to plan for a semester. So from a student learning standpoint, the idea of breaking the semester boundaries aligns very tightly with industry. And I'll show you some data that we have from that. On the community partner side, what it does is it moves out of, we're looking for a project to interact with you, and into a partnership. And this idea of, we're going to partner with you for a long period of time. If I go back to that summer camp that had the sailboat as an example, we've been partnering with them for more than 10 years. So as we deliver a project, we work on a new project, but we've also got students available that they can troubleshoot if a problem develops in an existing project. And so it's allowed us to deepen the partnership. It's increased the long-term value to the community. And it's something that EPICS has been recognized within the broader community engagement, I guess, community, that our ability to develop those long-term partnerships. And this has been one of the keys over for us. Now, I got to tell you, when I talk about the partnership, it resonates with something that I've learned out in Rapid City. When we're out on the reservation out on Pine Ridge, they talked about white van people. And the first time I heard this, I thought it was white people that drive vans. But what they're talking about are people that actually arrive in white vans, that they refer to a summer as the white van season. And for me, it deepened something that I understood, but it gave me a visual to have this. And they said white van people show up in a community to do something that they decided that they would help. They believe that they're helping poor people. So they arrive like on the reservation and go, oh, the poor Lakota people, we're going to here to help them. And often they're really doing something that makes them feel good. And then they leave when they're done. And when I was hearing them describe this, so this slide, I've actually incorporated in our faculty development slides, because what I do is say, how do we avoid being the white van people? And what I've learned with engagement, it comes back to that partnership, that what we learn is when we're showing up, we've got to identify the problem, not just what we think the issue is, but can we develop a solution with whoever we're doing? And those go to the very, the same roots of human-centered design, a lot of things in the design thinking, being able to respect our partners, and making sure that we're doing the right kinds of things with the people. And I think something I've appreciated with Mind is, if your institution had not established the credibility that it has with the Lakota people, that we could not have done we have not, we could not have piggyback onto that partnership. And I applaud that. I think that there's more things to do, but I wanted to share this because it's really impacted the trips to your campus and in the surrounding areas have influenced the things that we've done. Our course at Purdue is large. We're multidisciplinary. We've got about 30 different majors a year. We've only got 13 kinds of engineers, so we draw from a lot of different disciplines. We're about at 600 students a semester, 11 or 1200 students a year. We mix first year students, sophomores, juniors, seniors. We've got about 130 active projects, and we've had about 10,000 students that have come through our course in 25 years. We started small, started in electrical and computer engineering. I shouldn't say we, I said they started. This is before I got there with 5 partners and then grew. When we talk about EPICS programs, you know, and Micah shared that I'd been there last year. I should go back and count how many times I've been to our campus, but I've appreciated the opportunities that you've got in mind to, I think, integrate the community-based work with things like EPICS, with the other things that you're doing, like camp and other initiatives that you've got. But EPICS really looks different at each institution. And I've believed for quite a while that I think at Mines, you've got some opportunities within the larger community engagement space and the project-based learning to have even a bigger impact that can help the reputation of your school and the quality of education. Now, what Micah shared, we talked about a research seminar. So I want to show you some results that we've had through research. A lot of what we do in education is we try to move students from a novice to an expert. And we've done different studies, qualitative studies that have looked at students and have also looked at practicing engineers. And we've done some different studies. We've looked at human-centered design. We've also looked in the aerospace field around complexity and ambiguity. And what we tended to find is we could place students from novice to expert along an axis, but what we actually found is the distributions tended to be two-dimensional. And so if you think, if one of them is like the technical, your ability to design or your technical expertise, what would the other axis be? And I think it's interesting because I had one of my students, the one looking at aerospace, said, I don't want to do anything involving people. But what the data showed at the other axis was interacting with people. And so if you place people, if you think of what we do in traditional education is we teach them the technical and then say, okay, at some point you're going to learn how to work with people. Maybe in a capstone you get on teams. And the problem with that is that students or engineers develop on a diagonal. So there's actually a limit, what the research would suggest, is there's a limit of how far we can go technically if the students don't understand how to interact with people. On the design side, if I don't understand the need to get information from users, there's a limit to how far I can go. Handling complexity and ambiguity, at some point, I get problems that are so complex that I can't do everything myself and I need to rely on other people and trust what they've done. Well, how do I do that with being able to verify so that it's working with people? And what this talks about is students need experiences working with people to advance their technical knowledge. Something that we've seen at Purdue, we allow students to come in and use the EPICS class as an alternative path for the traditional first year class. And in 2014, we had a class here of 120 students. It's the first time I had a class with more women than men. And there were students that wanted to to use the community-based work for that. We've expanded the number up to 300, and we're not majority female. My staff kids me because they said they got the only boss that's disappointed when we're at 45% female. And I said, I'd rather be at 50. But what the data showed is the female students, if you look at the majority of them, if you look at the community service and you look at getting engineering experience along with the community connection, the majority of them actually talked about the community connection. They're looking for engineering experience. And what the data shows is they're looking for engineering experience and the opportunity to link that with a benefit to the community. It's why we're drawing so many. By the way, we're up to 300 students. We bring in about 2,000 students a year. We will get 600 to 700 students asking for the EPICS learning community as an option. So it's become an important part of our recruiting efforts. We've looked at other things with EPICS and women. Electrical engineering, mechanical engineering is where we draw the most students. And if you look at the female students, so the darker shade is mechanical. When we did this study, we looked at 10 years of data, and this was published in 2013. So our percentages are high, but this phenomenon stayed the same. This is the percentage that was in mechanical engineering, but we had a much higher percentage of mechanical engineering students that were female students. And what they talked about, it is that they talked about the opportunity to gain experience and again, also to make a difference. In some other data we talked about, has this kind of experience made them more committed to engineering? And in some cases, it said that EPICS didn't necessarily change it, but reinforced it. Like it helps thinking, okay, I can get through my classes and I'll be able to do something that's actually pertaining to life instead of just studying all the time. Another quote, your freshman year is kind of just taking like basic classes, math, chemistry, and physics. I really wanted to get an idea of what engineering was like and what you could do with that information. Okay, now I can find the chemical equation or something like that. I wanted to get an experience for that. When we've surveyed the students, if their experience here motivated them to stay in engineering, we had an overwhelming number that talked about that. One of the things we learned from this study is you need no, it hasn't impacted because I was so convinced that nobody was going to talk me out of that. But these kinds of experiences could help motivate them. What we also saw is we looked at retention data, and we looked at students who were in their first year were retained at higher rates. The senior year data was inconclusive, and there's these students that actually took EPICS in their last semester often were students who were leaving engineering and just picking up a class. I mentioned that we do high school and middle schools. When you look at the demographics, you look at the national average with female students and minority populations, African American, Latino, Native American, and our programs actually have more than 50 that have a majority of female students and students of color. And again, it's similar data that we have at the university level. Now, I became a professor because I wanted to help prepare students for industry, and now I get to do these community projects. But I wonder if we're actually preparing students for industry. So what we did, we did a study with alumni from our EPICS program. We had 524 surveys. We had a survey administered. One of the questions on this was if they'd be willing to be interviewed. We evaluated the data And then we selected, purposefully sampled 27 alums to conduct interviews, and we did a thematic analysis of those. What we found from the quantitative data is we asked if the EPICS course actually contributed to their professional competency. And if you look at the ones that said positively, that's over 75%. We talked about their perspectives about engineering. If it had an impact, it's just below 75%. And then their commitment to community engagement. We're a little surprised this wasn't higher. It's still the majority, but a lot of them, what they reported and what we found in the interviews was we attracted students who were very committed, and they didn't feel like the experience increased their commitment that was already high. But it was pretty substantial, and actually compared favorably with things like internships and co-op experiences. Now, the interviews that we did, a common theme was they talked about the EPICS experience being a bridge to their professional. So you see like this bridge graphic. It is looking at something that would span their education. Remember, these are all practicing engineers that are reflecting back on the experience. And they talked about linked, when we looked at the themes, there were linked pairs of things that they talked about, and it was actually an interplay with these. So they talked about our class being safe. And I don't know how many of your students talk about a class being safe, but these are practicing engineers. So for them, they realized that I was never going to be fired from a class. So there was a safety net in the class, but it was also doing something real. They had freedom to do things within a structure. And this was important, that they appreciated that they were given some structure and they're given some freedom. They understood what we're doing was a service to the community and it was engineering. And they understood that they were getting their feet wet in practice, but it was also an educational program. So it's a balance of these different factors that provided the impact. On their experience, they talked about that their EPICS experience benefited them because when they got out into practice, they said, "Ooh, I've seen something like this before." Now, one of the things that came out of the data is they didn't think when they were taking the EPICS class that it was actually going to translate into practice when they became a real engineer. But when they got out there, they realized that what they'd done actually translated because they'd seen something like that before. When they were asked to go into design review, to go, wow, we've actually done these before. One of the interviews that stood out to me was a young woman that had reported that she'd risen up in her company faster than her peers, which was a common thing being reported by her alum. And she said she'd gotten significant responsibility and she's working for a multinational company. And one of their big customers was threatening to quit and go to a competitor. And she was sent to visit the customer to try to save the account. And she said she was very, very nervous. She'd never done anything like this. She was feeling a tremendous weight because she knew that if she couldn't save the account, there could be people that could lose their jobs. That there'd be financial ramifications back at the company. And she got into the meeting, and she got a little bit into the meeting, and she said she got calm because what she suddenly realized was she'd done this before. Because she'd been a leader on a team that had worked with a local elementary school. And there was a time when the elementary school wasn't happy with the team. And as the team leader, she had to go over and meet with a principal and a teacher, mend the relationship, find a way to move forward, take that back to the team and make sure that they met their commitments. And she said that was exactly what I had to do in the setting. She did it, she saved the contract, but she never would have connected the work with the elementary school to what she was doing with a big multinational company until she had that experience. The third set of themes was the working with others. and the fact that they had to learn to work with people who are different. They talked about that as one of the most valuable skills for professionals is we had to work with different. They also said that was the most frustrating thing that they had as part of the ethics classes. So while they're in college, the thing that was most frustrating was something that they report later was the most value. So that wasn't quite sure what to do with those, but we remind students when they're frustrated that they may express frustration, but later in their careers, they're going to appreciate that. A breeze through. Wanted to show you some of the data to show you that there's different kinds of learning benefits. And I was hoping to open the door for some other questions or discussions because I really appreciated the invitation. I know you all do a lot of really cool things. And I'm interested in questions you have or ways that we could get better connected moving forward, whenever that is. Yes.
Hey, Bill, so, very, very nice talk. Thank you very much. Mike, I've got a detailed question. I just want to make sure I understand your slides properly. So can you pull up when you started talking about epics and women, and you had some bar charts about percentages?
Let me.
I guess it was about the middle of your talk, something like that.
Oh yeah, let me, wait a minute. I gotta go back through some animation. So if you're, I don't know if you're looking at that. Was that the bar chart?
No, next one. There we
Yeah.
go. Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask because I think I've got a really detailed question. So percent women in major, percent women in epics.
So the percent women in the major was during that 10-year slot. Okay, what percent of the students like were in ECE or in mechanical engineering were female? Then what we did is said, what percent of the mechanical engineering students in epics are women? So this is in the home department. And then if you look at all the students that chose, because epics is an elective class, like in mechanical engineering and ECE, it's an elective. How many chose that elective? And then I look at the demographics of that percentage. And so it's almost a 2-to-1. It's like 1.84. That if at this time, and I was going to say our percentages have gone up overall everywhere. But if you looked at that 10-year window, we had 10% women in electrical and computer engineering. We were just under 20% of the electrical and computer engineering students were female from those. And I also have to say at Purdue, students are not a mechanical engineer until they're a sophomore.
Yeah, I know that.
Thanks. Yeah, so that doesn't count. But you can do this with other disciplines. So it's showing that the first year data shows that students who are coming are choosing this higher. And there's actually a lot of research out there that shows there are different populations, and the women are more drawn to things with a community connection or things that matter.
Okay, so thanks. And then my other question, which is more conceptual, I guess, and philosophical, is you said you've got programs. I believe you said you have programs at Purdue that are allowing the substitution of epics for intro courses.
Yeah, well, the intro to engineering first year class.
Right, which is top engineering education group, right?
Yep. Okay. That's my school.
And that is.
So what we have
neutral, right? That course is discipline neutral.
Yes.
Okay. And
So what we have is we have a 2-semester sequence in the traditional path, and it covers a list of topics. One of them is design. And so what I said was, EPICS is a design course.
Mhm.
Could we use the design component in EPICS? And so then what we did is we went through and said, okay, what are the other learning objectives in the 2 courses that all students aren't going to meet with their EPICS experience? We took those, and it tends to be the major exploration and the introduction to computing. And so I teach a specialized class, and then students take 2 semesters of EPICS to meet the design and teaming outcomes. Now, what it's done is it's allowed students to be disciplinary neutral, but if students are interested in a more mechanically based project, they can get on that in semester 1. So there's some choice. Now there's limit to the choice, but we give students the choice of the project. So we'll have biomedical students wanting to get onto that and some movement around. So it allows them to get some experience with a real project with that without violating our first year.
So with the like the bar charts you were just talking about, since the students aren't in a major yet, if they do EPICS in this time frame, so that bar chart, do you go back in time and say, okay, this student became an ME, and so do you keep track of that data, or are those students who take EPICS early not included in that data you were talking about?
So the data that I showed for mechanical engineering, it does not. Those were only sophomores, juniors, seniors.
Okay.
So when you look at our distribution, it would be great to do that data. The biggest group are first year students that we have.
Yeah.
I'd
just be interested to see, to look at the distribution of those students as they go out in majors, and how does that compare to the regular?
So we do track. So one of the concerns at our place with a common first year, because we are supposed to be disciplinary neutral, we've tracked how students come in and what disciplines that they go into, and we with the 300 that come into EPICS, we're pretty representative of the different disciplines and where they go. So if you look at the percentages of students that come in thinking they're mechanical engineering that end up being mechanical engineering, it roughly compares with the overall cohort with that.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize the Q&A, so I'll shut up.
No, that's fine. Those
I
are
don't
good.
know if other folks, if Kareem,
Right.
want to ask.
So maybe along the same lines, to me, it's a curious thing of having something that is a class, but then how is it co-curricular, or how does it part of the curriculum, right? So we have our student competition teams, right? Students dive into that. They're intrinsically motivated, right? But it doesn't count for their curriculum. I'm curious, I think it might be electrical and computer engineering at Purdue, that at the capstone level, they have some.
So we have
projects. Yeah, I'm just curious about how, like the activity of EPICS, to me, maybe from a design background as well, seems to be the core of what engineering is, right? But then design is usually just a cornerstone or a capstone. So like, how do you make it worthwhile for those students that aren't just magically intrinsically motivated and have it count for their
so at any institution, it's a challenge, like where this right? I mean, it's with any design class. We have, and as I said, in the first year, it can count. There are different ways that it could count. Like in mechanical engineering, it can be used as 2 technical electives also. And currently, electrical, computer, environmental, multidisciplinary engineering, the EPICS can count. Students can petition for this to count it as their capstone. But what they have to identify is So when you look at the capstone, there's got to be a technical requirement. So we're looking at a project, here's the project, and we do that with a proposal. So the students actually write a proposal. That can be done. There are projects like that we identify. There are active discussions with agricultural, biological, biomedical, and mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering, which is where I got my PhD. I've taught capstone in mechanical engineering. We've used EPICS projects in capstone, but we just haven't allowed students from mechanical yet to come over and use the class. But what we do is a proposal to say this has the potential. And then there's a system where the students have to track the mastery of their outcomes. We just create a simple table with the outcomes that they have to master. And they keep an electronic notebook, which ends up being in a portfolio. So as an instructor, that we're looking at their experiences and making sure that they're checking the boxes. That proposal set a requirement for what they're going to get done. And at the end, they also write a report that goes back to the department. And those reports are evaluated on a continuous improvement basis to make sure that, hey, at the beginning, we approved that they could do this. What did they actually get done? And that helps inform our process, if that makes sense. And really what we've done is we put some assessment structures around what the students would do and have them demonstrate meeting specific outcomes. So with the capstone students, those are tied to the ABET requirements. For general students, and I didn't put this on, we look at their accomplishments. What did they get done? Especially compared to, and I mentioned that our projects are not tied to the semester. So at the beginning of the semester, the students work with their faculty mentor and determine what are their goals for the semester. So the accomplishments are, am I making progress toward my goals? There's a connection to design. What am I doing in my work? I was busy, but am I doing that in a systematic way and tying that to design? There's critical and reflective thinking, communication, and teamwork. So those are the 5 dimensions that they're evaluated on. And we require them to keep electronic notebooks. There's weekly reflections. There are things that they're producing that we can grade. So when Dr. La Rochelle asked, why did these students get these grades? I can go back and I can show, hey, here's the evidence that we did. Here's how we evaluated the evidence in a design class. So it's taking things that could be outside the curriculum. And this is just, if I think of, this is just my opinion. And I was having a conversation at the beginning with Micah that established me as an old guy. But having been around the profession, I really think that the students are looking for what can I do and what can I get involved with? I think what a lot of us have realized is there's a lot of the things we're doing that we can do online. And if we can do stuff online, if I can do something online, I can do it online and I can record it. I don't have to redo it per se. And that has the potential to free us up to say, what are some of the other things we do? I know your campus has been concerned with student recruitment. I know ours is. I think everybody in higher education. And I think, what can we do and what are the kinds of experiences we have? And if we put some of these things, I'll use the EWB team as an example. They actually came to us. It was a very weird thing. I literally was talking with, we're collaborating nationally. An executive director said, why don't you integrate your EWB team into EPICS and we can do this as a pilot. That same month, the student leaders came to me with a proposal to say, could we merge over with EPICS? And what they found is, and it's been an interesting thing because we've committed to work with the students as partners to maintain that core experience that they found so valuable. But how do we put the academic structure around? And what they found is there's things that we make them do, like weekly reflections, that they really don't um, they're not excited about that. But in their reflections, they actually talk about how they understand that they're learning and they're good for them. But the trade-off is they've got to do a little bit more documentation that nobody else likes, but the documentation is exactly what they need to be doing for the project. And it's given them a shared sense of accountability at the end of the semester, where they used to be struggling with people dropping out because they've got other classes, that everybody's still there because they've classes. So they've got that accountability, and it's made the group more effective with those. And the feedback from some of the people that were there during the transition, that extra structure has been beneficial for them, where instead of it's helped make their learning visible and improve the visibility, because now they get a little bit more, they're required to have some more structured mentoring. So I think that's one of the, honestly, it's one of the things I admire about your campus with the structures and the things that you have, is can we bring some of those things in it as part of the core experience, and maybe even expand the impact that they have of them. I know that you've got a lot of the competitions and stuff with camp and that are outside, but a lot of those principles with you've got the diverse design teams, and here's what you're doing. It is with those.
Yeah, right. I mean, those are extracurricular things outside the curriculum. And it's a funny thing to think about how there are some things that are special about that, some things that are special about epics, and bring that to the core of our curriculum, right? I mean, I didn't call you old. I said that you were a pioneer of engineering education.
No,
right?
it was fine. I was feeling old when you were talking. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. It's fine.
Right. Well, and I'm curious, like, of across the network of schools that do epics, are there ones that have like inverted their curriculum where epics is part of the core of their curriculum or their practice for students? I'm curious. Like, epics has been around for some amount of time and gotten some acclaim, and then it's like, but they progressive or to revolutionize how we teach students, right? Can that be at the center of that?
So I'm going to say not directly, but if I look at places like, so in our network is Itasca in Minnesota, and the Iron Range Engineering, or in Australia, the Charles Sturt School. So those are places that just went totally experiential. It wasn't that experiential learning has been around a long time. And I got to say, there's nothing that we do that we invented. But those were places when they looked at things that have put places to say, when we looked at, if I look at Iron Range, they're looking at their projects. And honestly, the model was, we're going to do industry projects. It's like, yeah, we ought to have some community-based projects, and we can run those, that we can run those through. So there are places that have inverted the curriculum, that have seen the match over with that. And I think that those are some of the exciting places. One of the things I really don't believe, I think early on in my career, we'd be at panels and people would say, should everybody do service learning or community engaged learning? And then you'd listen to the fireworks on both sides. I think if you're looking at an institution and said, at the core, we're about experiential and doing things that matter. If I'm on a solar car team, I'm looking at developing the skills to be able to go out and impact in industries in that. So the impact might not be immediate, but it's later. If I'm working on it, there are a lot of different ways to make an impact. I think if you look at the kinds of experiences, there tend to be 4 buckets that we put things in. The competitions are one, industry-based projects, the community-based projects, and the other bucket's the research. So there's like the VIP, the vertically integrated projects. So you're looking at those and said, all right, if we wanted to have everybody on a project team every semester, if I'm the department chair, I'm like, okay, I got to get everybody bought into this, and everybody's not going to want to do a community project. Maybe everybody's not going to want to do a competition. But if I start to make options to say we need you in one of those, most of us could get connected with one. It also starts to give students choice. And if I wanted to say, you know, part of us is you at some point you need one semester on a community thing, or we want you on, you know, the research. If student wants to go to graduate school, it starts to become a way for them to look at the research track with those. But I think when you're looking at the experiences, and then you can have common, the thing that's allowed us to expand in epics is there's a lot of variation with how individual faculty, we have 44 different divisions that are run differently by different people with different partners. But we've got common structures, we've got common assessment tools. A faculty member doesn't have to invent the assessment process. There's a lot of the overhead that you can do across. And I suspect a lot of those are just the design, you know, you're assessing design. So if you look at the structures, that can be across, and you could say you're going to be involved in one of these. And we've got a lot of different avenues for that. And it, you know, then you get into some of the student motivation literature that if they've got a choice, they hate you less or hate us less.
So I hate to be the person to put an end to this. This has been really interesting, and I think we're all starting to think about how to take what you've done and what you've learned and try to think about what that means for here at Minds, right? Not just in ethics, but how we might engage in context applied projects, design projects.
Yeah.
So I'm sure this is just a pause in the conversation. But so let me then thank you, Bill, for your time.
Sure.
A round of applause.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So thank you for those of us that joined live, and thank you for those that watch this being recorded.
Yeah.
So we'll be back in 2 weeks.